going to give you my basic presentation when I've given this to audience. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, looks loud and clear. Planet 7X timeline of events.
All right. Um, this is the timeline that I've come up with my research, where it's passed in our past history here. And there's 14 biblical events all the way up to Yeshua's sacrifice, and then we have 5 or 6 secular events. Whenever we get to the dark ages, data is extremely kind of mysteriously is missing. Only thing we have is some wood carvings and paintings, but according to the science paper that I'm reading on, it says that it appears as if the religious authorities at the time, which was basically the government, did censoring of this object. And keep in mind, the scientists at this time were looking for the evidence of a supernova. They didn't know that it was a NEO at the time. So what we'll do right here is we'll show the relationship with Noah's flood. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, this is Noah's flood. It mentions in Genesis that the floods started, and it took 40 days and 40 nights for it to rain. Then 150 days later is when the water started to recede, and that a great wind passed over the water that caused. Then he saw the water receding. Well, that great wind, when I was looking at this, that possibly Earth traveled through 2 debris fields. One that broke the canopy of water in the first one, and the second one, a large meteor hit the Earth that removed 71% of our top crust. And the meteor crater that was caused by the meteor was the Gulf of Mexico. Let me show you this example here on how this may have happened. We had a canopy of water. Remember, the Bible talks about right here, this is where a lot of people ask me a question, especially when I say the 71% of the crust. You see how I showed that there's extra crust right here? You can see how Pangea is held tightly. Held tightly together. Okay. The meteor shower ruptured the canopy of water, causing the Earth to be flooded. Then we had a large impact here that caused the Gulf of Mexico, knocking off 71% of our crust. That caused a debris field around Earth that later coalesced it into a moon. You can see right here in this drawing how Pangea had fit together here.
Clearly.
And roughly 300 to 400 years later is what it took for a moon to coalesce into a moon as we see it today. The moon is equal to the volume of the missing crust. Now, this is also the volume of our oceans. You see? So if you look at this a little bit closer and you dissect the Earth and you show how it hit and it causes a pressure wave, and part of the pressure wave will push the core upward, and the other one, the pressure wave will bounce off and come at an angle. You see this white mark right here? That's the Himalayas.
Wow.
See this purple? This purple right here is the pressure wave. Well, let's see if we have any data to that. And let me show you the Gulf of Mexico first.
Gotcha.
You see how we have
perfect.
Wow. How Africa came right off the shelf here.
Gotcha. Snugly fits in.
Okay.
It's quite snug.
Yep. You see how Cuba fits in here? They had a string of lakes where it caused it to break away.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And
Wow.
then you see how the Yucatan,
Got a big hole
well,
in the middle of it.
right. You
Wow.
see this how it's split right in here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a natural split that took place.
Yeah, you can see it through the.
And whenever you bring back the Yucatan, and I can prove that this is the original spot for it in one of the other slides. But take a note right here. You see how there's a lake that's cut in half
Mm-hmm.
in Florida?
Yep.
A large crater has one of the characteristics of a large crater is a double rim. There's a rim where the edge of Florida is here. There's a rim on the outskirts in the Gulf of Mexico. And this outer rim goes right underneath half of our state. And it meets right where Toledo Bend Dam is, because that's the edge of the crater. And it goes north of Houston and everything. Let me show you a little bit more here. This is how large the crater would have been. Because this happened at the
Wow.
time the Earth was flooded, the crater is not as pronounced because that wall of water would have helped compress the rim down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we can tell the size of the meteor that it took to make this hole. Keep in mind the Gulf of Mexico is its average depth is greater than the average depth of the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, and the meteor size for 1,100-mile wide crater would be roughly 110 miles across. I don't have the stats to break that down in kilometers for your listeners, but they can do the math there.
Well, I'm still in the UK. We're still on the miles as well. We're refusing to go to kilometers, Gil.
Oh, okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
Now take a look at this mountain range that goes below here. You see how it follows the curve,
Oh yeah, it's like a
the
double
mountain,
rim. You can see the.
mountain,
Yeah.
mountain range?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. It there's definitely some characteristics, and there's one of the things that's stopping the scientists from believing that that's a crater, but I'll get to that later. Now we're going to talk about the Himalayas, okay? You can see the curved shape of it. It has a semicircle shape. And what I'm saying is this is created in seconds, not thousands of years. You see, this is a gravity map from NASA right here. Okay, you're slightly heavier in Asia than any other spot on the Earth. And they can't figure out why. You see how this circular reddish area is? Then it goes across the Himalayas right in here.
Wow.
Well, that's where the pressure wave hit from underneath. The reason why you're heavier there is because it compacted the matter. The crust was compacted from underneath.
Oh yeah. It's like a reverse
Therefore,
impact. A reverse impact.
yeah, you have denser matter. You have your gravity is greater, and it's happened to push up the Himalayas where the crust was the weakest, and it came in a semicircle. And now we know why we're heavier here, and this purple, this reddish mark right here, matches the pressure wave that I showed you earlier, as far as the
diameter
match. Now, this also helps explain some of the anomalies we have on Earth throughout the Earth. One of them, you may recognize this is Ayers Rock in Australia.
I was going to ask.
You can see the towns. Yeah, you can see the towns here, right here.
Oh yeah.
This is how. See these scars on there? You can see that it had a rough ride. Let's say, it's scarred with longitudinal marks.
Yeah, long, very long striations.
Right. Well, I have a theory that this is called I think it's a monolith, they call it. This is the second largest in Australia. And this is a puzzle because it's not native to the area. It landed here very softly. It didn't come from outer space because it's not burnt. So it didn't re-enter the atmosphere.
Wow.
And it didn't land with any force.
Wow.
It had a soft landing. Otherwise, there'd be a crater here.
Yeah.
So that's what the mystery is right here. How did it get there?
There's no tektites, there's no nuclear heating from the friction of the atmosphere, and there's no impact.
Correct.
Wow.
Well, I have an idea that possibly that that it came at a very slight angle from where the Himalayas were pushed up, that this rock was tossed from the Himalayas when Australia was closer to the continent of India. And that it came at an angle, just like you throw a rock on top of a lake and you skip it, and then it finally loses energy and just lands softly.
Gotcha.
Well, you see these marks right here? That's about 13 miles away, right here. That it landed prior to the where it's at today.
Mm-hmm.
So if we put Ayers Rock right here, take a look at this. Tell me if we have a possible match on the skids, on the skid marks.
Wow.
And that it landed here, and this is where it lost most of its energy. It flipped a couple of times and landed softly. That's why we don't have a crater. So Ayers Rock originally came from the Himalayas.
Amazing.
This is the direction that the skid marks, and Mr. Australia was closer to India. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the moon here, just to prove out this one, because this is the basis. If we can prove this out here, then that tells us that this. I'm going to show you a logic triangle at the end of this that is very hard to beat. This is the moon, and you see all this dark area?
Mm-hmm.
These are canyons.
Mm.
Yeah, these are canyons. These are not craters. These are canyons. And let me show you the size of them, okay? This is where, you see, debris did not fill in when it was forming.
Gotcha.
So here's the U.S., roughly 2,000 miles across. If we place this is the Grand Canyon, this little blue mark right in here.
Mm-hmm.
And if we compare the Grand Canyon against the moon canyons, you can see, remember, the moon is, this is scaled to size.
Yeah.
The moon is only about a quarter of the diameter of Earth. You can see how large these craters are. I mean, these canyons. This is where material did not fill in. Now, this side always faces the Earth because it's heavy in iron, and it points to us like a compass needle.
Yeah, it's locked in there, yeah.
Right. Now, the back side of the moon has 4 times more craters than the side facing us. At some given point in its past, it's actually protected Earth from additional meteor showers.
Mm-hmm.
These are not random, but this is meteor showers that it's actually protected. It ran interference for us when Earth went through the tail, and I believe I know one of the cases that it passed.
Wow.
Now, this is a drawing. I think it came from NASA or someone. It shows how the Earth is pieced. I mean, the moon is pieced together, very large pieces, just like it would have coalesced when it came off of the Earth. Okay.
Wow.
Let me run a little video real quickly for you to see what I'm saying here. This is something that I made here. This is the meteor coming in.
See it now, yeah.
Next to the Gulf of Mexico. This is the pressure wave.
Gotcha.
And it's snapping the crust in not in one piece, but it was in multiple pieces.
Yeah. Scattering.
And then but this happened when the Earth was flooded. That's the only thing I can't show.
Yeah.
And part of this meteor was probably sticking out still in space.
Incredible.
Between the flooding of the Earth and this impact is what destroyed most of the dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why the Earth is cracked like an egg.
Yeah, there's fractures. I know. I've always wondered about the fractures, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge in the off the west coast of Ireland here, where I'm at, and it's just there's a massive fracture that we runs down right through the Atlantic, North Atlantic and South Atlantic.
Right here, this one, right
Yep,
in there.
that's the one. Yeah.
Yep. And the only way that the Earth is fractured at this amount, remember, if we had Pangea, remember, if Earth is molten,
Mm.
why would all the continental crust bunch up if Earth is spinning and it's molten?
Mm.
If it's spinning and molten, it would have spread evenly
Mm.
across the surface.
Mm.
So Pangea was formed because it was landlocked by the other land. You only had seas and lakes. You didn't have oceans yet. And this is to give you, for instance, on size of craters. This is Meteor Crater.
In Arizona, yeah.
That's that dot. Yeah, you see that dot in that picture right there? That's Meteor
Wow.
Crater. That's a mile across.
Wow, it's tiny.
This one right here is called the Chesapeake Bay Crater. It's 53 miles across. Then the Chicxulub Crater, which is on the Yucatan Peninsula, which they thought killed the dinosaurs. That's the large one in this circle right here.
Wow.
Well, if we look at how large this is, it's a dot right here, this yellow circle.
That's
it's only 1/10 of the size of the large one right here.
Oh wow! So that's the Yucatan.
Yeah, and a large crater has a double rim, and that's what we have here. We have a double rim.
Wow.
Now, this is where I want to show you some evidence. You see these cenotes, they call them. Cenotes is a limestone.
Yeah.
It's a limestone formation, a cave-like object. It's when the meteor hits, it liquefies the limestone like into a mud type of consistency. The water turns to steam, and then you get a steam bubble that comes up, making a perfectly round opening. Okay, a circular opening. That's all of these blue dots, or
cenotes.
Right.
Wow.
Now they said this area right here that I'm marking out is evidence for the Yucatan impact that supposedly killed the dinosaurs. Okay, this one. Well, my question is, what made these larger ones right here? See how wide that rim is?
Yeah,
compared to how narrow this one is?
It's like a field.
Right.
A field.
If you bend the Yucatan back down, like I was showing you earlier, that it went downward, then this lines up with the crater rim that I'm showing. This one is the Gulf of Mexico's cenotes.
So you actually have the cenote rim on top of the other cenote rim, basically. You have the two rims.
There was a study did by the Smithsonian with an international team of scientists, Germany, the Netherlands, France, I believe, and the lady who was the head of it. And they went 1 year all the way around the Gulf of Mexico and all around the Yucatan, taking soil samples and studying it. And they proved without a doubt that this meteor impact did not kill the dinosaurs, that it was much earlier, that there was a larger one that killed the dinosaurs. And that's an international study. Now, she came close to being fired for saying that because she went against the norm. Even though she had evidence to back her, I mean, this international team agreed with this, but they're not willing to go along with that because that breaks the norm. And this is, I want to show you the edge of that crater. It goes right around here. This is where most of the natural gas and oil fields are here off of the coast of Louisiana and Texas.
Yep.
Here's Houston area. Well, all of this region right here is sliding to the south right now because it's on this is all Mississippi silt. And it's sitting on a 45-degree rock ledge, which is the crater rim. And it's sliding on that 45-degree rim south and downward. We're
Sinking.
losing our elevation.
Mm.
Yes, all our coastlines around here are, eroding, and it's not from global warming. It's because our elevation is shifting. We're sliding. In the deeper water, these deep water rigs, what's called the +10, where the boat will dock up to a offshore platform to let people off. It's usually 10 foot above water. Well, they ended up being below water after X amount of years. They had to cut them off and raise them because this area is sliding deeper into the Gulf.
Amazing.
Now I wanted to show you this logic triangle here. This is kind of hard to beat. I haven't found anyone. One of the things that the scientists have a problem with is accepting the Gulf of Mexico as a world, as a crater, as an impact site, is that a large meteor impact creates two levels of heat. One is from the blast, and another one, it generates a frequency that violently vibrates carbon molecules to the point where they spontaneously combust. And you'd have a ring of fire that would go all the way around the Earth, all the way to, and you have a burnt out cinder.
Your skies would glow. Yeah, basically everything would just, wow,
Yeah, you'd have all plant life, animal life, and human life
incinerated.
would spontaneously combust, right? So that's the problem they have with such a large impact.
Gotcha.
But as this gentleman had challenged me, I said, it sounds like we have a problem with heat. He says, yes. I said, water's a good absorber of heat. He says, yes. I said, would the volume of two oceans be enough to absorb that heat problem? And I said, because this impact happened when the Earth was flooded, not in the state that the Earth is today.
Yeah, we've probably lost another ocean.
Well, in other words, this large crater and life to exist cannot exist unless the Earth was flooded. And the moon cannot exist unless you have a large impact. And the water cannot recede unless you remove crust, which is the moon. You have a logic triangle, and then how does the people survive a flood unless they're on a boat, as well as the animals? This is a logic triangle you can't beat. You have a crater, you have the moon, and the only way that this crater can exist with life existing on Earth is if it's a flooded Earth, because you have a heat problem.
You got a circular checkpoint where it keeps feeding back to itself and it keeps checking in a rotation.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
These points they have to exist at the same time.
I like your methodical reasoning, Gil. I really do. I like the logic and the methodology, and it's obviously taken you quite a while to put this together. It took a while to generate this research.
Well, it took me 3.5 years of 14 to 16 hours a day to generate all of it.
Wow.
But it was, you see, when we look at the moon, it's actual direct evidence that Noah's flood actually happened, and people don't know this. It's a visual reminder that's the only way that it could have happened for us to exist. To give you an example of some recent meteors, asteroids that passed near Earth. This is one right here recent. It's 2.4 miles. Halley's is about 9.9. This is LA here. All right.
Wow.
The one we're going to talk about later in the presentation is Comet Siding Springs. It was only about 2,300 feet or 700 meters across.
Mm-hmm.
This is a meteor in one of our museums over here. It's 15.6 tons.
Wowzer.
It's an iron meteor.
Iron, you can see the iron, yeah.
Yeah, and that was put in the museum in 1902. Now, if you didn't have a word in your vocabulary for meteor, what would be a good description if you only had minerals and natural things around you to describe this? Does a word like wormwood come into reference?
Mm. It looks like wormwood. It looks like it just looks the only word to describe what that looks like. I actually
Yeah.
have an old chest downstairs, so it's got wormwood in it, and it actually looks like that.
Yeah. So I have a picture of a person sitting right in this area, a full grown person. That's how big that.
Wow.
And uh and yet the one that hit the Gulf of Mexico is 110 miles across.
Wow.
Now we'll move on to the Tower of Babel. If we look at the writings in the Talmud, and not all the Talmuds right, but we look for historical references that we can either validate. It says that a third part of it sank down into this ground, and a second third was burned down, and the remaining third was standing.
Mm.
Well, this is supposed to be a remember fiery brick,
Mm-hmm.
very hard brick thing. How does it catch on fire? Now, let's take a look at the area. This is Babylon. This is Saddam's palace right here. This
Right.
Babylon is the mid kingdom of
Nebuchadnezzar.
right of Daniel's time.
Yeah.
But that's not the period of time that the Tower of Babel. That's the old kingdom we're looking at. That's the time of Nimrod. We need to look further south,
Mm-hmm.
right around here. Now, see what we have here. Now, take a look at the way they laid out the town right here. Exactly north and south,
Mm-hmm.
east and west grid.
Yeah.
Look at this one. It's
Slightly
slightly
off.
out,
Yeah. Yeah. See
right?
that?
But they knew what north and south was.
Oh yeah.
So if we take a closer look at this, it's 14 degrees out off of north. This is a moat that's around a zizzirat.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why you have a moat is because the base sank into the ground. The top is gone, and only the midsection is left,
Wow.
just like the description in the
The
Talmud.
first, second, and third.
The top of this was burned because remember, it's fired brick. The only way you could burn that is if you had fiery hail.
Mm.
This is where it is listed in the Talmud right here, in the yellow. And now we'll move on to the next one. Now, keep in mind the Tower of Babel, which is in Babylon right here. Let's see if I have a picture of it. No, I don't. The Tower of Babel and Solomon and Mr. Gomorrah, Mr. Destruction, which is in a different area, it's near the Dead Sea.
Dead Sea, yeah.
This
Sodom and
happened.
Gomorrah.
This happened in the same year.
Mm.
Abraham had already left and went to the Dead Sea area. Now, we have some interesting points right here. Remember that meteor that went over Russia?
Oh yeah. Crazy. I mean, the fact it was caught on camera with all the dash cams was insane.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at some of the stats here. It was 20 to 30 times more energy than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It damaged 7,200 buildings in 6 cities surrounding it. Injured, I think, somewhere like 1,500 people. If this object would have exploded closer to the cities, you'd have people vaporized. But it exploded high enough to where they only had the shock wave.
Shockwave, the after effect.
About 50% of all meteors explode before they reach the ground. So let's take a look at now Lot's wife. Remember, she was told not to look back. You see this picture to the left here? This is the picture from Nagasaki. when people were vaporized. Here's a man's ladder. It was vaporized. He was standing by it. He had his tool in his hand, and he was vaporized. This is the only thing left
Wow.
is his shadow.
Wow.
The picture to the right shows a man that was seated on a step, and he was vaporized. You
Wow.
can still see these things today, I believe. Now, remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. There was two cities.
Twin Cities, yeah.
Now, remember that the angels were held back from doing their destruction until Lot and his wife were in a place of safety. She was behind a rock or behind a wall. When she heard the first explosion, she came back around because she was, I guess, more or less being loved with her material goods, her home and everything. So she came back to see if her home was destroyed. Then the second blast hit, and it vaporized her, and it left a shadow on the rocks. It's man's description when they went back. How would you describe a shadow of a person on a rock if you didn't have the word vaporization in your dictionary
Gotcha.
or in your vocabulary to use? The best description they would say she was turned to a pillar of rock or salt, because this area is salt, because it's near the Dead Sea area. So that's, to me, gives a pretty clear one of the examples of this. Now, they had a gentleman that challenged me that Russia was covering up, that there was an EMP wave that was emitted, that Russia was suffering under a electrical failure because of that. And I told the gentleman, I said, meteors don't make sends out electrons like in a nuclear blast. I said there should be a EMP wave, and yet he was adamant about it. He was in the military of some form, and I said, well, next time I'll have a slide that represents this. This first slide shows it where it's about just started to explode. This is where it was at its peak on the second slide. Now, EMP would travel at the speed of light. Now, if you look at the third slide, it's finished. These lights on the cars are still on, as well as the camera that's showing this is still on.
It's true, the camera itself, yeah.
So there is no EMP wave, otherwise we wouldn't have all this camera data from cars, or the cars wouldn't even be working or driving. You can see that some of the cars are driving while they're showing this.
Sure, totally. Agreed.
So meteors do not create EMP waves. So I think this fairly explains the two events between the Tower of Babel and Lot's wife here. Keep in mind that God is in the timing. Remember, they had warnings ahead of time to be able to get out of there. Who else can warn you that a meteor is going to hit this exact spot? That would be a little difficult to do in the human terms. The next we'll talk about Joseph of Egypt. The moon, this is when the moon in the biblical or in the Hebrew is first mentioned. It was the dream that Joseph had when he was 16. That was in Genesis 37:9. Remember how he said he had a dream that it was 11 stars and a moon and a sun that bowed to him? Well, straight off the bat, I have a problem with the way that's worded. He said sun and stars. You can't see the stars with the sun out. So this is where he says it, the sun. In ancient Hebrew, I've come across this a few times. The word would have meant illuminated object, and because the stars and moon is already mentioned, the interpreter is assuming that the other object is a sun, when it could be our planet. just food for thought. That illuminated object could be either the planet X, or our sun. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to prove to you that it's actually our planet.
Wow.
Oh, I have to go back one. I'm having problems here. It's not functioning right here for some reason. Jesus, I can't go back here. Okay, now it's working.
Never sky disc, I see, anyway.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to point out also, remember Joseph, later he was age 40. He was a second in command. There was 7 years of plenty of food, and there was 7 years of drought. Well, this is one of the hallmarks of our planet. You get 3.5 year drought coming in, and then once it rounds the sun, you have 3.5 year drought as it's leaving. Okay? So, how do we prove that our planet came at this time frame? Well, you may have heard about this. This is the sky disk of Nibiru, found
Yeah.
in Germany. It's the oldest artifact that shows like the
Night sky.
constellation
Yeah.
of of the night sky in Europe.
Fascinating object. Copper and gold, I believe.
Yeah, I believe it's bronze and gold, gold leaf on it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read the official report on this object in the museum, I didn't agree with their findings of the experts, because they never mention that the moon is facing the wrong direction. For one,
Sure.
the illuminated side of the moon has to be facing the sun. You
Mm-hmm.
go to the next one right here, okay? So I can understand why the fabricator did this, is because he didn't have enough room, okay,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to put it the other way. But they didn't mention it. So they were looking for, I think, uh, a 4-day-old moon when they should have been looking for a 22-day-old moon. Because depending on the way the moon is facing, tells you how, in what cycle that it's in. So they were looking at the wrong phase of the moon to start out with. Two, they said that this was a normal eclipse. Well, a normal eclipse of the sun is done by a full moon,
Mm-hmm.
not a crescent moon.
Wow.
And the moon would be over the sun as it's shown here. It's shown to the right of it. The moon is not involved with this eclipse. That's the reason why they're documenting this. And I also didn't agree. I think this lower banana-shaped object in the bottom right here, they had even stated this as being
Solar
the
boat or something. They said something like a solar.
yes, from Egypt, that they, and I disagree with that,
I don't
because
buy any of that.
yes, what this is I believe it to be the it's horizon. It's in front of the viewer. If you take a look at this, this is the oldest observatory in Europe. It's in Gossig, Germany.
Cossack Circle. I've been there about 2 months ago. Believe it or not, Gil.
Wow, we should
Yeah.
have had this before. You would
I
have been
know. If I,
you had
if,
been stepping in the steps of the people who saw this first.
it's
You'd
funny
been
'cause I
in
had
their steps.
and I have researched the Nebra sky disk. I mean, it's dated to the time that we're talking about. It's the real deal. The patina that's on the Nebra sky disk is so heavy, and so
Yes,
crustacean.
it's real.
It's
Yeah.
the real deal.
It was actually the metal was tested, and that it was actually mined in Europe. So it didn't come from Egypt. It was mined there in Europe, and it always stayed in Europe. It was found in a colony about 20 miles southwest of this location called the Nibiru settlement.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe it was made at this observatory
Mm-hmm.
because of this reason right here. You see this area right here where I have in red, this
Mm-hmm.
is the old river,
Ah,
which is in front of the observatory. Remember, we're 24 degrees off here from where they would have been looking south. The river was changed because they put a dam in here and they tied it into it, but they closed off the old one.
gotcha.
So this is the view that's in front of the Nibiru disc right here, which is the riverbed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the fine marks on the original, you see that that's the only one that they marked with flowing water. They put marks there to represent water. They put other little marks to represent the bank of the river.
Mm-hmm.
These other ones don't have that because it's the north and west. It's your horizon.
The horizons, yeah.
Well, one of the things that I found that they misinterpreted was this constellation right here. They had a different name for it when it's actually Monsieur Orion. And this is Capricorn and this is Gemini, okay? Well, that gives you the month of, I believe, April. From the latitude of Germany, you cannot see the constellation of Monsieur Orion in April.
That's right, yeah.
Unless the Earth is tilted. You see this red line right here? This is the Monsieur Horizon of Gothic Germany right here, okay?
Sure.
You can't see the constellation Monsieur Orion. It's below the Monsieur Horizon. Only if you go to Luxor, Egypt, at that latitude, longitude or whatever, you can see the constellation.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that is 26 to 28 degree tilt. You see how the moon right here is a crescent shape?
Mm-hmm.
You see the arrangement of the planets exactly the way it shows on the disc. You have Capricorn here, you have Gemini here,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. This matches perfectly with the crescent. You have to have a third object that caused the eclipse for you to be able to see the stars.
Wow.
Now, that was, according to the software, that's April 6, 1810 BCE. Now, the date that they gave was, I think, outside the Bronze Age.
I think they gave 1600.
But they were looking at the wrong time. Yeah, they had misidentified some things on here. So, one thing the software does not compensate for. Remember in Hezekiah, when the shadow went backwards, it was documented worldwide that the calendars changed from 360 days to 365 and a quarter days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have to compensate on the software. The software, astronomy software, does not
Do that
change. They go with 365 and a quarter days.
all the way. Yeah, they don't. Yeah, the software. Most of the software is only geared up for, astronomy in the future. If you want to do your
Sure.
astrolabs and plan your modern astronomy, but it's not usually used. Although a lot of us guys still use it for looking back in the past, it's not what it's really designed for. But so.
As long as you look in the past and you have to compensate for certain variables, certain things that they think are constants are not, and I can prove that. We have to subtract from the time of Hezekiah, which is 700 BC, to now. You'd have to subtract 16 years from this date to come to the actual date that this even happened, April 6, 1794. This is exactly mid of the drought of Joseph of Egypt. Remember Joseph's dream at 16, where he said, 11 stars, the sun and the moon bow to him. All right? I've shown you that the earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees. So what would the view of a person on earth would appear like? It would appear as if the sky is bowing to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's age 40 now. and this is the mid of the drought. Now we have a real event that occurred that from his dream at age 16. From Gothic Germany to the latitude of Luxor, Egypt, is 26 degrees. Joseph was around Egypt over here, and that meant he would have tilted all the way down to the equator, giving the appearance to him the skies are bowing to him. Here's some Egyptian gods and goddess. You see how there's a disc with horns?
Yeah.
Well, let me take you back to this right here. Take a look at this right here. See, Taurus is right here?
Yeah.
And where's the disc at? The disc is in Taurus. The planet that we're talking about is in Taurus. That's what they were showing here. Well, this is in Taurus. See, this is rooted in most of the pagan gods of the world is this object.
Yeah,
this is rooted in Baal.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is rooted in Baal worship, Zeus, and Jupiter. Remember, Zeus threw lightning bolts that dissolved mountains. Well, there was a thread of truth to that I'll come back later on. Well, when the two planets get close enough to each other and they tilt, lightning jumps between the two planets. That's, some people say 2 to 3 kilometers wide, but there's evidence on the moon and other planets that it could be as wide as 80 miles across, the lightning bolts. And if they hit a mountain, plasma, whenever you take matter and insert more energy into matter, it turns into plasma. So a mountain could dissolve in front of you if it's hit with plasma. So there's a thread of truth to this Zeus myth, if you want to call it. They actually saw something in the past. And this answers the story of Joseph here and how Earth tilted 26 to 28 degrees at a 3-hour eclipse. This is the first mentioning of the moon, and the skies actually bowed to him. The next one was the Exodus of Egypt.
The plagues, yeah.
This stayed a mystery for me for a very long, long time. I had difficulty explaining this one, and until finally it dawned on me what was happening here. Remember, there was 3 days of darkness. Remember, at Joseph of Egypt, I just said there was 3 hours of darkness there. Remember Yeshua when he died when he was sacrificed, there was 3 hours of darkness there too. The reason why this was 3 days is because the object had a collision with the planet Ceres. Ceres, after the destruction of the planet Ceres, it became the asteroid belt. Okay, so how do we know this?
Timeline.
If you take a look from Exodus to Joshua's long day, it's only 52 years. From Joshua to Job, only 131. From Job to King David, only 290. From King David to Hezekiah, 358. If you put this all together right here, this is what you get. When it was coming in, it plowed into Ceres. It slowed its forward speed to 1/20th of its normal orbital speed. When it came around, it gave 3 days of darkness for the Exodus. Not having enough speed to go into deep space, it came back early, only 52 years. It picked up more speed going around the sun and brought it further out. It brought it 131 years. Came back again. It took 4 times before it picked up its normal speed, and it was documented each time in the Bible when it showed up. So you have a progression of its orbit increasing as it gains speed.
It's exponentially trying
And
to escape, but it's getting dragged.
yeah, because it can only reach maximum speed according to its mass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so it was under the speed was under, so it had to take 4 times before it gained all of that speed that it needed. Just like we'd send a space probe and we'd let it zip around Jupiter 4 or 5 times before sending it off
You get a
because it
slingshot.
picked up speed.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a maximum that it's able to achieve according to its mass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what happened here. Now, we're going to talk now about Joshua's long day. Joshua's long day is a interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
He had an ally in the north that asked for help because there was a massive army that had amassed. They were going to wipe out the allies of Joshua. So God told him to go help him and that he would deliver the enemy into his hand. Joshua was outnumbered. He only had 30,000 men. The enemy was 300,000. He was outnumbered 10-1. They marched throughout the night to get there in time. Now, you can read this in the story. It says the camp and the enemy were frightened. There was fear in the camp before Joshua even got there. And the reason why was that because the sun is late getting up. It doesn't state this, but I can prove it in a model. Because Earth's rotation is starting to slow down. So the sun was late coming up by 2 or 3 hours. That gave the men started thinking that that's a bad omen. Okay?
Mm.
Joshua used that for his advantage. He came in charging, and the enemy started to run. So he's massacring the enemy, and then this meteor shower comes in, destroying only the enemy. Now, keep in mind, he has 30,000 men stretched out fighting. None of his men are being hit. And this is with swords. This is hand-to-hand combat. Only the enemy is being hit. Remember where I told you how the moon has protected us in the past?
Mm-hmm.
The moon was protecting Joshua at this time from the meteor shower. Only the enemy was being hit. Now, remember how he said, remember, he did a forced march throughout the night, didn't rest, went straight into attack, fought 12 hours, and he asked for another 12 hours to fight. The day was extended by another 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that happen? Let me show you a little video.
Sure.
A comet has 3 tails: the dust tail, a plasma tail, and the debris tail follows this loop.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This red line is the orbit of our planet 7X. The green line is the orbit of Earth going around the sun. The tail points opposite of the sun. Okay. Earth is entering into the plasma field. Now, this is the big debate. The astronomers say that the tail of a comet is ice particles, and that there's missing matter in the universe. There's 96% of all matter is missing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the physicists say that there's no missing matter, that the vacuum of space is not a true vacuum, that it's filled like a lake of plasma.
Mm-hmm.
And the plasma is the missing matter. Remember, the fourth state of matter is plasma. And that there's no missing matter. And that the tail of a comet is plasma, not ice particles. Well, watch this video. We're going to keep on going here,
Wow.
and
Fascinating.
I'm going to show you how it's possible for Earth's rotation to slow down by 12 hours. It will lose if you do it in 24 hours, you will lose about 4.5% of its rotation compounded hourly. As it's going deeper and deeper, it's compound where within 24 to 28 hours, Earth comes to a complete stop. It's like turning a rheostat or a dimmer switch. It slows down quite right on time, just slowly. Therefore, you don't have mile-high tidal waves. You may have coastal flooding, but you don't have mile-high tidal waves.
Sure.
This is what happened.
Sure.
This is going to happen again. People need to get a grip on how this is possible and how the astronomers are going to predict the wrong half of the Earth to be hit, because there's a 12-hour delay in the Earth's rotation, and it'll be the opposite side that is actually hit. So this is what caused, see, Earth is entering the, let me see, the debris field right here. And this is what caused the meteor shower that killed the enemy that Joshua was pursuing. So now we have a logical model, and this is the same Chinese overlay from our study. And this is, the same overlay is producing all these models correctly.
Wow.
It says large hailstones from heaven fell upon him all the way to Asher, and they all died. The enemy of Joshua. It says the sun stood still and the moon, because the moon is caught up into the plasma as well. So it is possible for this to happen. The solar winds will go towards, and this is what causes the direction of the tail, is the solar winds. Now, what's interesting, when this happens again, when we enter that plasma tail, you're going to see the northern lights and the southern lights come all the way down to the equator. And it'll be 4 to 5 times more intense on the colors. And it will howl like a trumpet when the aurora is all the way down to the equator, whenever we're going into the plasma field. This is the way it looks around Alaska area or Canada, northern Canada. But multiply the intensity times 10.
Wow. I was just looking at the Northern Lights earlier. We had them in the north of Ireland here, Gil, this year.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, down as far as the north of Donegal, up the very north of Ireland, which it's incredible to see it this far south.
Well, you're going to see it even go further. Remember, now, this is to help you prove out what I'm saying here. Remember, I was saying that there's a dispute between two camps. The astronomy camp that says it's ice particles, and the plasma, and then the physicists that say it's plasma. Well, just recently, remember the 2 meteors I showed you? This meteor is Comet Siding Springs, and it passed by Mars. The physicists predicted, if they were right, that this would illuminate the aurora of Mars, and you'd see lightning jump between the two. And the astronomer said, no, it's just ice particles. It won't have any effect. Well, guess what happened? When Comet Siding Springs passed, it lit up the aurora of Mars, and lightning struck between the two, proving that the tail of a comet is plasma. There's other data that says that the meteor shower or the fiery hail happened between the 2nd and the 3rd hour. Well, when we do the calcs on this, at the speed that Earth travels in its normal orbit, with its entry angle that the Chinese gives us, it exactly starts the second hour and ends on the third. Not bad for ancient people that had no data on planetary orbital mechanics, you know. Remember in the Bible it says your doom comes within 1 hour? Well, this is, whenever you calculate, Earth travels 8.4 Earth diameters in 1 hour. When we put the correct angle in here, okay, it tells us the diameter of this object is somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 times the diameter of Earth. Because the debris field can't go beyond that.
Gotcha.
And there's plenty of area between the moon and between the Earth and the moon for this planet to pass in between. Because gravity is the weaker force, not the major force. It's electromagnetic that is the major force. Gravity has a limit, which is called the Roche limit, which is this gold circle you see around the planet. On Earth alone, it's 1.5 times its radius. And this is where you get geosynchronous orbit.
Gotcha.
To put a satellite. Gravity can't pull back the satellite.
Yeah, the inverse square law gives you the Roche limit, yeah.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, if the moon has 1/5 of the gravity of Earth, and Earth is 5 times greater gravity than the moon, why is the moon moving away from us by 1 inch a year?
It's never been explained, is it? There's so many anomalies with the moon, which is what I kind of think is so fascinating with your research here, Gail. It begs to be questioned and answered and explained more by the physicists, and they just don't know what the moon, where it came from. They have no idea why it's there, why it's losing its, eventually it's going to disappear from us. They say it controls our tides and everything else, but it is slipping, that's for sure.
There's people just picked up a calculator and did a little bit of math, and if the moon moves away at 1 inch a year, it wouldn't take long before the moon is touching the Earth. It's not hundreds of millions of years. It doesn't take that long. It has to be a fairly recently made moon. There's some things here that math doesn't kind of breaks the mold of this,
Very interesting with the Roche limit there, though. Very, very interesting. You have plenty of room for that planet X to come through there. Plenty of room.
Yeah. Remember, the two planets tilted towards each other. It's like 2 bar magnets coming within close proximity. And then just remember, these things are moving at about 80,000 miles per hour.
Sure.
So they're not just, if it would be stationary, they would suck each other in, okay? But they're not, they're moving.
Yeah.
So the only thing they do is they attract to each other and they tilt 26, 28 degrees.
Yeah, because they can tilt on the axis.
And then as it's moving away, it straightens back again. Close to its original. And there's other texts you may have known. Emmanuel Velikovsky writes in his book.
Velikovsky.
Well, there's some ancient documents that says that him and his men saw an object, some sort of object that was 50 times larger than the moon. And this picture I'm showing you is a representation of that, of 50 to 1.
Wow.
As it passed exactly halfway between the moon and Earth. This is going to happen again. So that explains logically, and we have a model that works, of Joshua's long day. How he got 12 extra hours of daylight, and how he got a meteor shower, killing his enemy. Now, we're going to talk about Job's trouble. Job's trouble happened around the same time as Ruth. Ruth was in Jerusalem, and Job was around the Golan Heights. We can get that because his son lived near the Golan Heights, it says in the Bible. Well, if we read carefully what the first sentence says here, says, fire of Elohim fell from the heavens and burned up his sheep and his servants and consumed them. That means there was no bodies of the animals or him. Would a crater kind of explain that? Or if it vaporized them?
Incinerated, basically.
Totally okay. Now read the third messenger when he came. Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their brother and the firstborn, and see, a great wind came from the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell on the young men, and they are dead. The pressure wave from the explosion is the wind that knocked down the house. That consumed the servants and the animals. This is part of Job's trouble. Remember Ruth, there was a severe drought in the land, and that's why she came back to Jerusalem shortly after Job's trouble, okay? Remember, Naomi was a stranger. She wasn't picking with the other Hebrews. She had to pick a little bit of a distance away. Remember, Boaz was not picking in his own field. He was just watching. Well, that's a Sabbath year. In the Sabbath year, the fields are left for the poor to go and pick. The owner doesn't pick. So Boaz is just watching. Naomi is picking for her and her mother-in-law. The following year is a Jubilee, because only in a Jubilee can Naomi get her land back. So we know approximately when this happened. Now, King Saul and David. It states at the end of King Saul's reign that there was 3.5 years of drought. And in another book, it says that in Samuel, that David had 3 years of drought at the beginning of his reign. In Chronicles, it says Saul had 3 years of drought at the end of his. Well, if you read the book of Samuel, it gives you, they had 7 years total, of drought. So that gives you 3.5 and 3.5. This object came around exactly midway between the two events. And during Solomon's time is when the priests got corrupt, and they created the Star of David. This is the Star of David right here. Now, it wasn't created by David. It was created during the time of Solomon by the corrupt priests pertaining to this event right here. That this star came exactly ushering in the kingship of David. Now, this is an interesting one. Jonah's warning to Nineveh. He says, in 40 days your doom comes, or your destruction comes. Try to do what Jonah did. Go to a town of 20 to 30,000 people, and don't create a miracle, because none is mentioned, and try to convince 20 or 30,000 people to repent. How did he do it? Is it maybe because they didn't have internet or TV? and that they were in tune with nature, and they saw that the crops were dying of a severe drought, and that they saw bird and fish dying, and the earth was quaking, and the seasons were off. They had record-breaking temperatures and seasonal changes. And the only thing that Jonah had to come there is point to the sky, because it was could be clearly seen at 40 days. Because right here, if you look at this, he says, a wicked and adulterous generation seeking after a sign will have no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Now, in the book of Jonah, it says, in 40 days, and Nineveh shall be destroyed. Well, when it crosses the earth path, the total time it takes before where it recrosses is 76 days. Well, look where Earth is right here at 40 days. Earth is right here. At 40 days, you can clearly see it. It's behind the sun. You can see it behind the sun.
Yep.
Only thing Jonah had to do was point to it. That's why he didn't have to commit not a single miracle.
Wow.
This is going to happen again, because the world is a wicked and adulterous generation. Most of the world will only have 40 days. This is when the government's going to tell the people that this object is not a comet, that it's an inbound planet. See, only the people that read the Bible understand it will understand this warning way early enough. When we see it in December during Hanukkah, the Feast of Lights, it's called, that they will know that they need to go to Jerusalem, because that's the pivot point of the tilt. When Earth tilts again, if you're 90 degrees off the axis of its tilt, remember the axis of tilt is going to be around Jerusalem. If you're 90 degrees of that, that's the east coast of America. And you draw a circle around the globe that goes right through the middle of South America and Australia, you're looking at 300-mile-an-hour winds. If you're on the open water, if you have some, mountains around your area, you may have 150-mile-an-hour winds.
Wow.
But a F4 tornado creates 300-mile-an-hour winds. Grass doesn't stay in the ground. 150-mile-an-hour winds is more like a hurricane at maximum speed, at gust. And trees don't stay in the ground.
That's for sure.
All right. So would you want to be 90 degrees from the pivot point? The answer is no. That's not counting the tidal waves involved with this when the Earth is shifting and tilting 26, 28 degrees.
Wow.
So this is why Jonah is important. That's why he said, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Remember, there's only 2 pages of Jonah. The other one was where he was eaten or swallowed by a whale. Okay? Well, remember he says, look to the skies for a sign. Well, we're not looking for someone to be swallowed by a whale in the heavens. It's the 2nd page of Jonah that makes sense. Now we'll get to Hezekiah. This is when the shadow went backwards during Hezekiah's time. We have an error in the English. Okay, remember these 3. We had Jonah at Nineveh over here. We had Hezekiah, and we have the 185,000 enemy soldiers, which are parked right out. All 3 of these happened in the same time period.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is the error we have in the book of Second Kings. In King James, it says the shadow went down on a sundial. Well, in the Hebrew, the shadow is on steps, and it's a stair. It's the stairs that it went backwards on. There's a big difference between the two. A sundial reads the sun from east to west. That meant the earth had to stop, reverse direction, stop again, pick up speed 4 or 5 times greater than what that, and regain the lost time and come back to where it was before, because there's no mention of lost time. All the oceans would have emptied out and covered the continents. That can't happen if it's an east to west motion.
True.
But if we take a model and say it steps and it's the shadow from a window, and we face it south, now exactly 10 steps gives us 26 to 28 degree tilt. Where did we hear that before? We have the same tilt. That's why it was a north to south tilt over Jerusalem. Now there's no delay in time. You don't have that 12-hour problem or anything like that. It had a tilt, the shadow went backwards, and it went back to its original position without a problem. So there was also a drought during the same time period. Let me see. 3 years and 6 months. Remember I told you it was 3.5 years coming in and 3.5 years as it was leaving. So exactly midway was 3.5 years right here. The book of James. It had a total drought of 7 years right here in the second book of Kings. This is one of the hallmarks. Now, during this time globally, I think in 60 to 80 countries, all the calendars changed within about a year and a half of this, from a year and a half of this point in time right here. Calendars changed from 360-day year to 365.25 days. Because remember, Ceres is gone, and the magnetic field is no longer compressed as tight as it was. So it allowed Earth to be dragged outward just a hair,
just a little bit,
which is half of 1%, and that increased our year to 365.25 days.
Wowza! It's mind blowing.
So this is the asteroid belt, and Ceres is right here in it, and this is a destroyed planet. The spacing of the planets are not random. There's a formula to it, and the formula tells us there should be a planet right where this debris field is. You can see where there's 2 more Mr. debris fields, one behind Jupiter's orbit and one in front of Jupiter's orbit. This is either destroyed moons of Jupiter or destroyed moons of planet 7X, when it either collided with Jupiter or something. But we got debris fields here. It's from something that is destroyed. And you can see how our planet passes through the debris fields, picking up debris. And that causes the meteor showers. Speaking of meteor showers, right outside of Jerusalem was 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. They died in one night. Their bodies were not consumed. Okay? Think of small meteors the size of bullets going through the men. Therefore, when the king woke up, all of his army was dead. Now, the Jewish writers say that it was by fire from heaven which took away their lives and did not consume them, their bodies, nor burn their clothes. So ancient writings even says this. See,